Welcome to the preliminary rounds of the second National Virtual Moot Court Competition by Thomas George and Associates. We are delighted to have the Saranya Chandrasekharan as a judge, who is currently an outreach head at the Parantapa Sciences with a combined expertise of about 5 years in practice of dispute resolution, social entrepreneurship, and political campaign management. She also works at the cusp of the community mobilization. She also works at the cusp of the community mobilization and policy reforms in the field of women and child welfare. Ms. Chandrasekharan is an alumni of the National University of Singapore with a master's in the dispute resolution and international law. We are delighted to have you, ma'am. The rules of this moot court competition right now are each speaker will be speaking for 15 minutes each, and there will be 1 minute for rebuttal and 1 minute for sir rebuttal. Any extra time remaining to the speaker one shall be added to the speaker two. I'll be showing play cards of 3 minutes, 1 minute, and time's up. It is the judge's discretion if you want to extend the time, and judges are free to give the feedback after post round. Let us start the round. I request the petitioners to begin.
Sure.
All the best, guys.
Thank you.
All the best, Rocket.
So, ma'am, may I? Ma'am, am I audible and visible properly? Will you please?
Yeah.
Uh, the council seeks permission to proceed with the present matter.
Please proceed.
Much obliged. In the present with this, with the permission of this bench, the honorable of this honorable court, the council would like to brief the facts of the present case.
Go ahead.
Much obliged. The Union of the Replamento is the world's largest democracy, and having different people from the different educational and the financial backgrounds. The country is a secular, socialist, democratic, and economic in the nature. Since many years, there is a law which criminalizes the unnatural sexual intercourse irrespective of the gender, and it is opposite to the LGBTQ community. This honorable court has held that a right to privacy is a fundamental right of each and every citizen of this country, and hence it is also says that a law criminalizing a consensual sexual activities, that is a person who is above the 18 years of age, with the consent in the private, and if anyone others deal with it, it will be a violation of article 14, 15, 19, and 21 of the constitution of the Replamento. And hence, considering the same, this honorable court has also further deal that the person who is belonging to the LGBT community can have a status of the third gender, and they can be identify themselves as a third gender. But in with this decision, this court has not upheld or not discussed any of the civil rights which can be granted to this particular community. And hence, considering the same, many petitions has been filed before the various high courts within the jurisdiction of Replamento. Considering a decisive question of law, this honorable court take the cognizance and transfer all the such matters before this honorable court for the hearing. With this, a council seeks permission to proceed with the issues.
Please proceed.
Much obliged. The petitioner will deal with this present matter in the 4 issues. The issue number 1 and 2 will be dealt by the council number 1, that is me, and my co-counsel will deal with the issue number 2 and 3 and 4. With this, the council further proceeding with the issue number 1. That is, whether or not a Hindu Marriage Act 1955 and a Special Marriage Act 1954 can be read can be read in the manner including members from the LGBTQ community. It is humbly submitted before this honorable court that a definition of the marriage should be liberally interpreted considering the present time, and if we fail to do so, then it will discriminate and exclude people who belong to the LGBTQ community, as they has been identified as a third gender separately. It is humbly submitted before this honorable court that in its leading decision, that is of the retired Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, this court has held that a right to privacy is a fundamental right. The court also held that the ability to make decision on the matters close to one's heart and one's personal life involves the aspect of the human dignity and the human personality. This court further going upheld and also upheld that the decision that a person have a freedom of the self-determination and is free to decide the matters relating such as a marriage, family, procreation, and all these are the integral parts of the one's own dignity. Considering the same, the councils would like to state that the person who belong to the LGBT community are also the citizen of this country and they should be awarded with the right to privacy. It is humbly submitted before this honorable court that a person and they should also be awarded with the fundamental rights. This court has upheld that a right to marry is not directly mentioned as in the constitution, but it is a part and parcel of the constitution under Article 21. The decision of the Lata Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh has clearly mentioned it is a part and parcel of the constitution under Article 21. So, considering the same, it is humbly submitted before this court that the person of this country should avail with the rights of the right to marry and the right to privacy. Again, a matter that is can a person belonging to the LGBT community can be read within the ambit of the Hindu Marriage Act and the Special Marriage Act, considering a word used as a person. Before proceeding with that, a council would like to highlight that, and it is humbly submitted before this court that it has been propounded in the Ramanlal Bhailal Patel versus State of Gujarat. A person is nothing but a natural person, and just we have to treat him as a human being. If we see the initial part, that is section.
Council, I have a question before you proceed.
Indeed.
You spoke about persons, but I would like for you to refer to Section 5 and Section 12 of the Hindu Marriage Act and tell me if persons is the only language used by the law and your understanding of it and your interpretation of this.
Much obliged. The council, as it has been highlighted by the bench, the Section 5, which refers to the party to the marriage as a groom and a bride, which generally we considered as a person on the man on the day of the wedding and the women on the day of the wedding. But in the many recent decisions of the various high courts within the jurisdiction of this Replamento, that held that the person who belongs to the transgender community can be read within its ambit. Such decisions has been given by this honorable court in the cases where the Arun Kumar and Sirja versus Inspector General of Registered, where this court has held that a trans women can be considered within the ambit of the bridegroom, and hence considering the same, a person belonging to the LGBT community can be read within the ambit of the person. Also, as the bench has highlighted, what can be a inclusive definition of a person, as it is been provided by the famous jurist Pollack, that a person is subject to the rights and duties, and every full citizen of this country is a person. An individual who is a human being subject to the attributes of the rights and the duties is called as a natural person. And the same is been propounded in the Ramanlal Bhailal Patel versus State of Gujarat, that a person should be included only as a human being. And hence, as we
sorry to cut you off, but we are not discussing specifically the definition of person. I think like all of us would appreciate the law when we say persons are defined as you are mentioning. We are here talking from the context of civil rights of marriage. So, how are you interpreting the terminology given in the law, bride and bridegroom, to mean a gender fluid term? That's first question. Second, if that's not directly mentioned in the statute, what jurisdiction does this court have for giving an interpretation of law that is so far-fetched that it would infringe upon the rights of the legislature? Those are my two questions to you.
Much obliged. As it is mentioned that the bride and bridegroom can be read as a person who are it is always considered that a bride and the bridegroom are the person who are on the day of the marriage as a man and a woman. But the council would like to highlight that in the recent decision of the court of the Uttarakhand High Court, where the court in the case of the X versus state of Uttarakhand held that a petitioner has a right of the self-determination, and irrespective of that honor, if he wanted to be identify himself as a female for any sake, then he should be allowed for the same, and further the confirmation from any authority for the same should not be needed. So if for the sake of the marriage, if person wanted to be treated him as a female or a male, then they are free to do so.
So, counsel, are you stating that so I'm clear on what you're trying to state on transgender marriages. Now, are you also saying the same interpretation be extended in cases of two women marrying who both identify as well as are biologically assigned as women, and two men marrying who both identify and are biologically assigned as men? Are you saying on the day of the marriage alone, there should be a right granted for them to self-determine as a man or woman? Is that your argument, counsel?
No, the council would like to highlight the section 2A first of all of the Hindu Marriage Act, where it says that the act is applicable to all the Hindu persons. And considering the same, the definition of the bridegroom, and as the bench has stated that the council is not highlighting only upon the day of the marriages. The council would further highlighting that on any occasion, if the person wanted to treat him as a male or the female who is belonging to the transgender community, they are free to do so. And the same can be included within the ambit of the bride and bridegroom, as it has been provided before this court that many of the judgment the same has been provided.
Please proceed.
Much obliged. As the council has already highlighted the provision of section 2 clause A of the Hindu Marriage Act, that is the law is applicable to all the persons. Also, if we see the very purpose and the objective of this act, it says that the act is made for the modification substantially the institution of the marriage and let down the uniform system and rules for the marriage for all the Hindus. It says that it is a uniform system and the rules for marriages to all the Hindus. And if a person who belongs to the LGBT community is professing the religion of the Hindu, then the rules for all the person who belonging to the Hindu religion should be same, and a uniform system and rules should be applied to all the Hindus for the sake of marriages.
Council, one question. So, like you rightly read, can you reread that section on customs that you just read, that provision?
Section 2A.
Yeah, you were reading about the provisions and unification part. Can you reread it?
Sure. Section 2A. Section 2A of the Hindu Marriage Act, that says that this act is applicable to any person who is a Hindu by a religion, any of its form or a development, including a Virashaiva, Lingayatas, or a followers to the Brahmo Parthana and the Arya Samaj. So considering the same, the council is highlighting the word that is used as a person that who is a Hindu by the religion itself. Again, the council highlighting the provision of the very purpose and the objective of the code that is made for the modification and the substantially it is for the institution of marriage, and it lists down the uniform system and the rules for the marriage for the person who is belonging to the Hindu religion.
So, essentially, by your own admission, this law is unifying the customs that existed under the Hindu religion. Would that be correct?
Right.
Does the Hindu custom or religious ways of following the religion provide for marriage of a same gendered person? Was that the intent of this law in any way, or not? That's the question.
Indeed. So, as it is said, as it is highlighted by the bench, that the customs and the rituals of the Hindu religion, the same question is will be dealing by my co-counsel in the issue number 3 and 4. If the bench allows to do so, then the
Sure.
co-counsel can deal with
Sure,
it.
sure.
Much obliged. So with the concluding remark, the council would like to highlight that a spouseless person is always a leafless tree, and hence, considering the same, a person from the LGBTQ community should be awarded with the right to marry, and they should be included within the ambit of the Hindu Marriage Act. With this, the council proceeding further would like to highlight the provisions for the Special Marriage Act. In the special marriage, it is further said that this act is also applicable to any person in the India and all the Indian nationals who, if we see Marriage Act, that is a solemnization of the marriage, as anything contained in any other law for time being in the force relating to the solemnization of marriage. This shows that the legislation in its wisdom purposefully chooses a very gender neutral words and enabling thereby LGBTQ community to take the advantage of the same act. Also, the council would like to highlight a recent petition which has been filed before the Delhi High Court, that is of the Dr. Kavita Arora and others versus Union of India, where Delhi Court seeking the declaration says that a special marriage act ought to apply to the couple irrespective of any gender and their sexual orientation. And if if the act is excluding the same-sex marriages, the Special Marriage Act will be the violation of the Article 14 and 15 of the Constitution. With this, at the end, the council would again like to highlight the para number 155 of the Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India, where the Honorable Chief Justice Deepak Mishra has highlighted that there is no doubt that an individual has also a right to union under Article 21. And as many jurists and also the legal dictionaries mentions that a marriage is nothing but the union of the two people. Considering the various definitions and the interpretation provided by the Chief Justice Deepak Mishra, that is a right to union is a fundamental right under Article 21. Each and every person of this country have a right to union, and hence considering a right to union as a right to marriage, the LGBTQ community should be included within the ambit of the Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act. With this, if
quick question.
Yes.
When you say right to union is a fundamental right, how are you defining union as marriage?
As it is been says that the many juries and also in the various religious scriptures also, the marriage has always been considered as a union of two people. If we see the Hindu Vedas itself, it says that the always a marriage is a union between the two it is a union between the bone and bone and the flesh and flesh. I think the bone and the flesh do not have any gender specification, and with this we can say that if a union is a of the flesh and the bones, then it is a person. Also the LGBTQ community is a person. The person from the LGBTQ community have a bone and a flesh, and considering the same, the right to union and the right to marry can be awarded to the person belonging to the LGBTQ community.
Thanks, Council.
With the permission of this court, the council would further like to proceed with the issue number 2.
Sure.
Much obliged. The council, the issue number 2 is whether or not
I'm
the civil rights
granting
can be granted to the
permission
member.
to proceed, Kushila. Go ahead. Go ahead, Amir.
The issue number 2 is whether or not a civil rights can be granted to the members of the LGBTQ community. Before proceeding with this issue, the council would like to highlight the para number 113 of the National Legal Service Authority versus Union of India judgment, where the court held that unless and until there is a recognition of the third gender, the community, the LGBT community cannot be awarded with the civil rights such as right to vote, right to own property, right to marry, right to claim formal identity, and so on. The same third gender identification has already been provided by this honorable court. Now it is time to award this community with the civil rights such as the right to own property, adoption, maintenance, formal identity, and so on. Proceeding further, the council would like to highlight the section 24 to section 26 of the Hindu Succession Act, which lays down the grounds for the disqualification of the person from inheriting a property. But there is no such a parameter which is exclusively.
Council, sorry, before you proceed, just a quick question.
Sure.
You have utilized the transgender community judgment that the Supreme Court gave for the purpose of extending it to the rights of the LGBTQ community. There is a significant difference in the two. One, the transgender community, they were fighting for their right to recognition as a person. That's not the same for a person because that's gender, this is sexuality. I hope you appreciate the difference between gender and sexuality. So,
listen, and unless and until this recognition has been provided, another civil rights such as the right to inherit a property, right to vote, right to adoption, right to maintenance cannot be awarded to the person unless and until there is a legal recognition. So only for the sake of the recognizing a person who is belonging to the LGBT community, the council is highlighting the judgment that there is a recognition of this person, and now it is a time for the court to award them with the civil rights.
Go ahead.
Much obliged. Proceeding with the issue, the council first would like to highlight the provisions for the right to inherit the property. Proceeding with this section 24 for the disqualification of the person from inheriting a property, but there is no such any parameter for the disqualification of a person only being a transgender or a person belonging to the LGBTQ community. And if any person disqualifies person belonging to the LGBTQ community, it will be a violation of the section 28 of the Hindu Succession Act. With this, the further would council
just a question. If drawing from what I previously asked you, if a person is of any sexuality, we are not talking about gender fluidity, we are talking about sexuality. The law does not say that if my son happens to be gay, he does not have a right to inherit my property. The law doesn't say that. I hope the respondent councils are not arguing that either. So in what manner do you want to put forth the argument before this court that a grant of succession rights need to be given to members of the LGBTQ community. Because as far as your arguments go, that succession rights already given, in what way is it differentiating?
Proceeding with the further, the council would like to highlight the judgment of the Himachal Pradesh High Court, where in the case of the Sweetie, that is named as Guru versus General Public, where the Himachal Pradesh High Court has granted the right of a legal heir or a right to inherit a property, a person who is belonging to the Hijra community, which is a part and parcel of the which is a part and parcel of the LGBTQ community. Considering the same, this judgment was based on the previous judgment of the 1990s, that is of the Ayas and others versus State versus Badshah, where the court has held that the person who is belonging to the Hijra community uh, can have a right to inherit a property, and and as per the customs there exists that there should not be any that the property belonging to the particular community should not go outside of that particular community.
Are you saying that right now, if a person identifies as gay, they do not have the right to succeed to their parents' properties or anything? Is that what you're saying, or what is the issue that you're trying to highlight as a violation of their right to succession, council?
Indeed. So, as the council has highlighted that in the recent past only the people has given the recognition, and hence if we see the societal view of the country, that if any person who belongs to the LGBT community, there once the community or the family member itself, they identify themselves who is belonging to the LGBT community, they generally what they do is they force to the person to left the particular family, or they disqualify that person from family itself, and they do not grant any of the right which one person of that particular family member can avail of. And for that, if a person is excluding from directly from the family
Council,
itself,
can this court interfere in the testamentary rights of an individual? Like, if absolutely, what you're saying could be a very horrifying, ostracizing fact for a person belonging to the LGBTQ community. But if a person writes a testament or a will stating that they do not wish to give property to XYZ person, can this court interpret or interfere in the testamentary rights and then say that you have to give rights to another person that they didn't wish to give when they were alive? Also, the person is dead, so can the court really force upon a dead person to change their testamentary?
The council would like to highlight that the court, it is not requested to the court to intervene with the testamentary rights, but it is requested before this court that uh, considering the societal view of that towards a particular person, this court should grant a person belonging to the LGBTQ community a legal recognition, or with this legal recognition provided by this court, the person who is belonging to this community can have a right to inherit property. The council is not saying that they do
Don't
not
they
have a
already
right to
do,
inherit.
council? Again, my question is, don't they already do?
They do already have, but in the proper and right manner.
So they can go under the rule that exists. Why are we in a writ petition for that? Can they not go to the court under the Hindu Succession Act or a Indian Succession Act and go and enforce their right? Why are we arguing this in a writ petition?
So the societal view is somewhat different as towards a person of the LGBTQ community, and uh, always it is a right of any person to have a inheriting a property, but which is not granted granted to that person with it, or with this honorable court decision, the person who belonging to the LGBT community can avail their rights of inheriting a property which are which for which they are excluding directly.
Please proceed. Thank you.
With this, the council would further like to proceed with the provisions for the adoption and the guardianship. There are always two laws which can be deal with the adoption, that is the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, and the another is a very religion neutral law, that is of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. If we again see the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act section 2 clause A, that says that this act is applicable to any person who is a Hindu by religion itself, and also it is highlighted in the United Nations Convention of the Rights that especially for the child, when giving it the adoption, the best interest of the child should be considered, and unless and until there is a best interest, they should not be awarded, they should not be granted the adoption for the same. Again, the council would like to highlight that the section 41 of the Juvenile Justice Act provides that and provides provision for all the person to have a right to adopt a child under this provision, and the child can be get adopted within this ambit. And with this, the council humbly submits before this court that granting the civil rights such as the right to inherit property, right to adoption to the members of LGBT community should be granted with these rights. With this, the council humbly submits that a person who belongs to the LGBT community should be read within the ambit of the Hindu Marriage and Special Marriage Act, and they should be awarded with the civil rights. If the honorable bench permits, the council would like to call upon his co-counsel to deal with the whole
Sure. Proceed.
Much obliged.
Good morning, Lordship. I am the counsel number 2 appearing from the petitioner side. Am I audible and visible? Am I audible?
You're audible.
The council seeks permission. The council seeks permission to proceed with issue number
Please
3
proceed.
and 4. Much obliged. Issue number 3, that is whether or not the custom, traditions, rites, and ritual form an exhaustive code as contested by the Republic of Replemento. It is humbly submitted that code is a set of rules and laws that governs the citizen of the state, and each state has its own sources of law, like judicial decisions, legislature, custom, and rituals. Since the Republic of Replemento consists of different people of different religion and strata, religious custom and tradition, these combined custom, traditions, rights form a code. A code is said to be exhaustive when all the things are enumerated in it and nothing is left for imagination. But this is not the case. In the Republic of Replemento. The code do not include LGBTQ community in it. It rather only recognizes binary gender in it. According to the reply of the Republic of Replemento on various writ petition filed, that giving LGBTQ community civil rights goes against ethos and cultures of the country. If we talk about ethos and the culture, these are based on the different various Vedic text of the country. I would like to highlight a verse from Ramayana in which Lord Rama has as good omen for every auspicious occasion. This has been cited in para number 13 of National Legal Service Authority versus Union of India case. I'd like to highlight that when the third gender community has been identified and glorified in our religious custom, traditions, rites, and rituals. In ancient time, the queer community had no legal recognition given to them. But after 2014, the NALSA judgment, the court gave them the legal recognition and also ordered that there should be no discrimination against them in any statute of the country. But still, they have not been identified in our various custom and traditions. By not including them in the code, we are violating their fundamental rights, which has been guaranteed by the Constitution of Replemento. I would like to highlight Article 14 and 15 of the Constitution of Replemento. Article 14 guarantees right to equality and equal protection before law to all the citizens of the country. Since LGBTQ community are citizens of the country, they should be seen equally as other men and women of the country. But they have been constantly discriminated on the basis of their sex by many people, which has been strictly prohibited by Article 15 of the Constitution of Replemento. In para 81 of NALSA judgment, it is clearly stated that Article 14, 15, 16, 19, and 21 of the Constitution do not exclude transgender from its ambit. Moreover, in Sunil Babu Pant versus Nepal government, the Supreme Court of Nepal has held that the homosexual should be treated equally as other men and women.
Before you progress to your argument,
Yeah.
you just spoke about transgender community being mentioned in our scriptures, and you also spoke about the NALSA judgment. So clearly, you've gone through the judgment as well. So right now, from what you spoke about, what the court has understood is we are talking about the transgender rights and the rights of the transgender communities to have civil rights. Are they denied as of now post the NALSA judgment? Is that your argument, or are you saying that the court needs to look at the rights given to transgender community and extend it to the rest of the LGBTQ community? What is argument right now?
Indeed, I would like to highlight that in NALSA judgment, they have given legal recognition as third gender, but their civil rights have not been discussed yet in any judgment passed after NALSA judgment. Therefore,
Your
the council
co-counsel also referred to a particular judgment where one of the courts have spoken about a transgender woman can be recognized as a bride or a bridegroom on the day of the marriage, right?
Yes, the Arun Kumar judgment.
Yes. So you mentioned that there is no civil right discussion that have happened. Further, I think the adoption rules also allow for transgender communities to adopt.
They have been liberally the court came on the discussion on the decision by liberally interpreting it, but there nothing has been mentioned in the statute of the country.
Can
Which
I
is very
write the
essential.
statute of the country? Does the court have that right? I think the court can only interpret, right? Like, can the court direct the legislature to form a law?
Yes, the court cannot make laws, but they can direct legislature to do it.
Can the court do that?
Yes, if the constitutional provisions of the LGBTQ community are being violated,
what
then
law does the court have that right to direct the legislature to legislate on a particular topic?
Article 143, which is advisory jurisdiction of
Can
the
you
Supreme
read that
Court. Yes, ma'am. Article 143 states that if at any time it appears to the President that the question of law or fact has arisen or is likely to arise, which is of such a nature and such public importance that it is expedient to obtain the opinion of the Supreme Court upon it, he may refer the question to the court of consideration, and court may, after considering things fit, report to the President its opinion thereon.
This is a repetition, right? Like, do I have that right? Does this court have that right under 143 article?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Lordship, Ladyship.
Okay, proceed.
In Sunil Babu Pant versus Nepal government, the Supreme Court of Nepal held that the homosexual should be treated equally as other women and men, and the state cannot deprive them from enjoying their basic rights given in the constitution. Even the Yog Karta principle, which is a universal guide of human rights, guarantees that LGBTQ community should not be abused, violent, and discriminated on the basis of their sex. To conclude, the Council would like to say that custom, rites, ritual, and traditions do not form an exhaustive code, as it does not include LGBTQ community in it, and by not recognizing them in the code, it goes against the various provisions of the Constitution as well as various international conventions like Yog Karta principles, which Replementro is a signatory to. If the bench is satisfied with the arguments, the council would like to proceed with issue number 4.
Please proceed.
Much obliged. Issue number 4, that is whether or not the member from the said community can be allowed to marry as per the rituals of their respective religion. The council would like to proceed to argue for this issue in twofold arguments. That is, every person has right to marry the person of their own choice, and liberal interpretation of word marriage is required. It is humbly submitted that though the country has repealed its colonial era law that directly discriminated against the LGBTQ community, but many legal protections have not been given to them, such as same-sex marriage is not being discussed in the law. Article 25 of the Constitution that talks about freedom of conscience and free profession, practice, and propagation of religion is being violated of the LGBTQ community. Article 25 guarantees that every person is entitled of freely professing, practicing, and propagating its religion. Considering the Article 25 of the Constitution, the Council is of the view that members of the LGBTQ community are citizen of this country, and they should be governed, and they are governed as same as of, and they are governed by the same law as of the other member. Therefore, the LGBTQ community are also deserver of this right. Excluding them from following the rituals of their respective religion goes against Article 25 of the Constitution. According to the ratio decidendi of Lata Singh versus State of Uttar Pradesh, right to marry is considered as integral part of Article 21, that is right to life. The same ratio decidendi has been observed in Shafin Johan versus Asukan KM, in which the Supreme Court has observed that right to marry a person of one choice is also an integral part of right to life, has right to get married, and is also free to decide his or her own life partner, whomsoever it may be. And we should respect a partner and rituals of their respective religion. According to the rituals of marriage, in every religion, bride and the bridegroom are the rudimentary practice that is being followed in our society. Most of the statutes define marriage as an institution of two people of opposite gender. But nowadays, this needs to be changed as per the needs and demands of the society. In many foreign countries, the word marriage is being defined as union of two people who can be of any gender and sex. Many acts have been enacted regarding this issue in common law countries like New Zealand, England, Canada, such as Civil Marriage Act 2005, Definition of Marriage Amendment Act 2013, respectively. Likewise, in many judgments, such as Arun Kumar and Shrija versus IG of Registration, SGH Limited versus Federal Commission of Taxation, liberal interpretation of the marriage conditions given in the statute has been done. In Arun Kumar, the court recognized the marriage of transgender and cisgender as valid marriage and gave the identity of a transsexual woman as of bride as per Hindu Marriage Act. In SGH Limited versus Federal Commissioner, the liberal interpretation of statute is explained. The jurist said that utility of applying and adopting single embracing theory of a statute is constitutionally defined, which means restricting the interpretation of the statute is an unreasonable discrimination against the LGBTQ community. The golden rule of interpretation states that plain meaning has to be imparted of a statute unless such interpretation would lead to an absurdity. Therefore, I would say that by doing liberal interpretation, we are expanding the scope of marriage, which is essential in the given time period. To conclude, the council would like to say that marriage is not just a relationship between two individuals. It is a bundle of civil, social, and legal rights that comes with it. The said community should be allowed to get married as per the rituals of their respective religion as equal of the binary gender as they enjoy their rights. If the bench is satisfied with the arguments, the council would like to proceed with the prayer.
Proceed.
Therefore, in the lights of issues raised, arguments advanced, and authority cited, the Honorable Supreme Court may be pleased to order that the provisions of Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act can be read in a manner including LGBTQ community. Hold that the LGBTQ community have all the rights such as right of adoption and maintenance, right to inherit property. Hold that the custom, traditions, rites, and rituals do not form an exhaustive code as contested by the Republic of Replemento. Order the member of community are free to marry as per the rituals of their respective religion, and any other relief that Honorable Supreme Court may be pleased to grant in the interest of justice, equity, and good conscience.
Thank you, Council.
The counsel for the petitioner seeks permission to approach the dais.
Sure, please proceed.
Greetings to the bench. If it may please this honorable court, this is the counsel appearing on behalf of the respondent in the case of Rainbow Non-Profit Organization versus Republic of Replemento. If your ladyship is well versed with the facts and jurisdiction of the case, the counsel seeks permission to move to the issue
Sure,
at hand.
please.
Much obliged, your ladyship. The first issue pertains to whether the Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act can be read in a manner to include members from the LGBTQ community. This issue is to be contended in a twofold manner by the counsel on behalf of the respondent. Firstly, legislative intent of the acts do not include LGBTQ individuals. Secondly, gender categorization is a prerequisite for a valid marriage. Starting with the first sub-issue, the counsel humbly contends that legislative intent of the said statutes signifies marriage to be a heterosexual institution. This can be inferred from the parliamentary debates during the enactment of the Hindu Code, where it was said that marriage amongst Hindus is a sacrament. It is part of one of the 10 sanskaras of the Hindu religion. Marriage has always been a union and an adult male and an adult female. This can even be inferred from close reading of Section 5 of the Hindu Marriage Act, as well as Section 4 of Special Marriage Act, that clearly specifies a marriage to be between the bride who's at least 18 years of age and the bridegroom who is 21 and above. As the counsel on behalf of the petitioners have already agreed that bridegroom and a bride are an important necessity, and between the statute here showcases that there must be a bride and a bridegroom to constitute a valid marriage. This has already been agreed by the petitioners. This is clearly indicative of the fact that the Act aims to cater to the marriages of the heterosexual couples. This assumption of heterosexual marriages is further concretized on reading of Schedule 1 of Special Marriage Act, which clearly lays down only the prohibited degrees of heterosexual relationships. It does not provide for room for assumption anything outside heterosexual relationships. This shows the legislative intent of the Act being heteronormative in nature. It is further contended that gender categorization is a prerequisite for valid marriage. Therefore, if marriages among the members of the LGBT community are permitted, then according to the said acts, they will be deemed either void or voidable. This is evidenced through
Counsel,
reading of Section 12 of the
before you
Hindu Marriage
proceed
Act.
to that argument,
Your Ladyship.
so the rights of this court rests in terms of interpretation of the law as well as protection of fundamental rights. Would you state that if there is a law that violates the fundamental rights of an individual, this court has a right to intervene? Yes or no?
Your Ladyship, the court should intervene when there is violation of fundamental right. However, in the present case, there is legitimate state interest in limiting the rights of the LGBTQ individuals, which is to be further elaborately contended in the second sub-issue by the council.
Okay, please proceed.
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. As the council contended, if the marriage between the LGBTQ community is permitted, then the Section 12 of the Hindu Marriage Act will be infringed, which basically provides that for a marriage to be voidable, it has if the marriage has not been consummated by a penovaginal mean, then the marriage will not be considered as a valid marriage. This was even upheld in the case of Samar Roy Chaudhary versus Snigdha Roy Chaudhary. And such marriage is considered to be outside the bracket of valid marriage when it itself shows that the marriage between the LGBT community cannot be permitted. Therefore, marriage between the LGBT community will be against the legislative intent of the said acts. Furthermore, the other legislative provisions that are allied to the marriages.
Sorry to cut you, but are you arguing that this marriage would be void under the Hindu Marriage Act or voidable?
Your Ladyship, it cannot be termed valid if we go by reading the Section 12 of Hindu Marriage Act as well as relying on the judgment of Samar Roy Chaudhary. However, if it's not a valid marriage, it can either be termed voidable or it can be termed void.
What is the respondent's argument though? Is it voidable or is it void? Because there are two different situations.
Indeed, Your Ladyship. If by looking at the legislative intent, it is termed to be void, Your Ladyship. If we do the purposive interpretation of the said legislation, it will itself show that the conduct of the LGBTQ community by marrying within the community can be termed void, Your Ladyship. Further, it is contended that legislative provisions, there are certain other provisions which are allied to marriages, such as Section 498 of IPC and Domestic Violence Act. They do provide for the legislation to be between a woman and a man, which in itself shows the heteronormative nature of other allied legislations to the marriage. Thereby assuming these, there must be a gender categorization in order to constitute a valid marriage, which is reaffirmed by looking at Section 498A of IPC and the Domestic Violence Act. Therefore, it is submitted that the petitioner's claim of interpreting person to include the LGBTQ community is against the words of the aforesaid legislations and cannot be considered as a valid marriage. If Your Ladyship is satisfied with the present issue, the council seeks permission to move on to the next issue at hand.
Please proceed.
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. The second issue pertains to whether civil rights can be granted to the members of the community. This issue is to be contended in a twofold manner. Firstly, limitation of civil right of marriage to be heterosexual union arises from legitimate state interest. Secondly, granting of civil rights is a legislative function. Starting with the first sub-issue, it is humbly contended that civil rights cannot be granted to the community as there exists a legitimate state interest in limiting marriages to heterosexual unions. This is determined by the doctrine of legitimate state interest, as which was reiterated in K.S. Puttaswamy case. The doctrine provides for basically three essentials. Firstly, that there must be a law in existence to justify the encroachment. The second requirement mandates legitimate state aim and ensures that the restriction of the legislature fall within the reasonableness mandated under Article 14. Third requirement further puts upon the legislature to have proportionality between the object and the means adopted to achieve the legislation. To this, the legislation of the Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act clearly mandates a marriage to be between heterosexual couples if we look at the legislative intent by doing the purposive interpretation of the acts, which is already contained in the first issue. Furthermore, marriage is a public concept and it requires public recognition as it was held in Amina versus Hassan Koya case. It is the first year of societal structure and hence it is Replemento's duty to protect the societal structure by restricting marriage to heterosexual couples. It cannot be relegated only to one's private domain. This, along with the contentions in the first issue, together justify the encroachment.
Quick question. You mentioned that there has to be a social acceptance for marriage or for any other custom. How is the state proposing to establish that there is a social non-acceptance of marriage between the community members of LGBTQ?
Your Ladyship, the fact that the same-sex marriages are neither recognized nor accepted in any codified or uncodified personal laws in itself shows that it's not acceptable to the society as yet. So which clearly shows the social exigency, which is the second part of this contention, which will be elaborately contended, which in itself shows that they do have, the LGBT community have been recognized. However, granting of the civil right and recognizing LGBTQ individuals are two different parts of this, two different things as such.
Does the law provide any provisions or restrict the state from going into the process of a referendum to understand whether or not to grant civil rights? And to give you a context, there are highly religious societies like Ireland, which have done a referendum for the purpose of granting civil rights to the LGBTQ community members. From that perspective, does our law, this state's law, restrict or provide for the provision of referendum in these cases? Because your primary argument is it is against the socially acceptable norms.
Your Ladyship, the context of Ireland and different other countries cannot be imported to India, as India is in itself a very vast and diverse country. So importation of some Replemento, I'm so sorry for that, Your Ladyship. Replemento is a vast country, and looking at the different religions that exist in the country is the state's duty to uphold their rights and rituals. And considering that marriage is a sacrament and which has always recognized marriage to be between heterosexual couples, which has existed since time immemorial, we cannot be relegated upon just proposing a referendum as such, because it has already existed.
Haven't we ever in the past, as a judiciary or a legislature, ever struck down age-old custom?
Your Ladyship, indeed, the legislature has struck down certain parts of the custom which is archaic. However, in the present case, it is an integral part of the religion which is to be contended by my co-counsel in the further issues elaborately. So a custom which is part of the integral religion will be infringement of the secularistic principles of the state, which in itself the Replemento cannot do as such as of now.
Was Sati, triple talaq not a integral part of custom, culture and religion?
Your Ladyship, Sati was brought in by the legislature. It was not struck down by the judiciary. As far as the triple talaq is concerned, as well as the review petition that has been filed by, in the case of Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala, which is the Sabrimala issue, which in itself, there have been a review petition that has been filed in the Supreme Court as to what extent can the judiciary interfere into the integral religious matters. So hence the matter is sub judice. The court should at least wait the issue is being given by the Honorable Court on this matter.
Counsel, any of these social reforms, if you would have noticed, whether sati was legislated and not a judicial decision, which is absolutely fine, was done because request from the community, from the people for a societal reform. And the question is the law provide or prohibit for any consultation with the members of this country for the legislature to go into any kind of social reform? That's the question this court has for the
a legislative function which is not for the court to adjudicate upon. Hence, the Council for the Respondents request the Honorable Court civil unions is creating a new right which is rather outside the purview of judicial adjudication. Hence, it should be rested upon the time of the judiciary to the legislature to legislate upon.
Proceed.
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. The Council was contending about the second requirement of the doctrine of legislative state interest. To this, the Council proposes the test of palpable arbitrariness. It means to overlook the alleged unreasonable classification and to focus on the social exigency and the ultimate need of the legislation. Here, as mentioned in para 7 of the moot proposition, the culture and ethos of Replemento does not recognize same-sex marriages. And moreover, the fact that same-sex marriages are not recognized and accepted and codified in personal laws, the social need and exigency for such classification is evidenced, thereby fulfilling the second essential of doctrine of legitimate state interest. Thirdly, there exists a proportionality between the object of Special Marriage Act as well as the action being carried out by the state to put up the meaning of the aforesaid legislations, which will further be evidenced by the contentions in issue 3, which will be contended by my co-counsel. Thereby, it is submitted that the three essentials of legitimate state interests are met. It is further contended that granting of civil rights is a legislative function. As the petitioners have already agreed upon that there is no legislation as such. So the court can only adjudicate upon the legislation that have already been passed on such matter. When the petitioners have already agreed that there is no legislation, then there is no point contending this matter in front of the Honorable Court. Therefore, in light of the aforementioned contentions, it is submitted civil rights cannot be granted to the members of the LGBTQ community. If your ladyship is satisfied with the arguments, may the present council call upon the co-counsel.
Please proceed.
Much obliged, ladyship.
Greetings to the bench. Permission to approach the dais.
Sure.
Much obliged, ladyship. If your ladyship is satisfied with the arguments advanced by my co-counsel, the present council seeks permission to move on to the next two contentions at hand.
Please proceed.
Much obliged, your ladyship. Your ladyship, the first contention that this council on behalf of the respondent has pertains to whether or not customs, traditions, rites, and rituals form an exhaustive code or not. The primary contention here, your ladyship, on behalf of this council is that customs, traditions, rites, and rituals form an exhaustive code, simply because the state cannot intervene in religious aspects. Your ladyship, an exhaustive code here means an enclosed system, which cannot be intervened by any external, cannot be intervened by any external authority or an external body, as defined in the Punjab Land Development and Reclamation Corporation versus a presiding officer of labor. The term exhaustive means that that a particular concept will not be forthcoming of any other definition apart from the hard and fast definition, which has already been assigned to it. The Republic of Replemento, your ladyship, is a secular nation. It has a population of people from various different religious backgrounds. And therefore, it is the duty of the state to protect all of the religions which is contained within its boundaries without interfering in any. This was stated in the case of Vasudev versus Vamanji. The reasoning behind this, your ladyship, is that the state aims to protect the unamendable and unalienable part of the Constitution, which is the basic structure of the Constitution itself. In S.R. Bommai versus Union of India, principles of secularism were considered to be a part of the basic structure doctrine. Your ladyship, religion is is based on customs. Customs shape a religion, and also rites and rituals, once they have been practiced since time immemorial, without any discontinuity, are considered to be customs. They receive the stature of customs. Now, since these customs have existed since time immemorial, Your Ladyship, they have attained the force of law under
Comes if a custom, and let's even for a minute agree to your point that it has been a custom since time immemorial. If a custom is detrimental or discriminatory to the citizens of the country, and in violation of in that situation, does the court have a right to protect the fundamental rights? And isn't it the responsibility of the legislature as well as the judiciary to strike down such customs?
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. Your Ladyship, the council would like to answer this in 2 pointers. Firstly, Your Ladyship, the paragraph 7 of the moot proposition has already dismissed a similar petition seeking for civil rights for the LGBT community, which means that this is a repeat. This case has already been heard by the Honorable Court. Secondly, Your Ladyship, the council would like to back on laws in this pointer. Here, Your Ladyship, there is an essential religious practice test which was laid down in the Shirur Mutt case, and it very clearly stated that if there is a particular practice which when invalidated will erode the entire religion in itself, will be
Sorry,
considered.
council, I just went through para 7. Where does it say it was dismissed? And maybe I'm missing it out. Can you read it out for me?
Apologies, Your Ladyship. I'm assuming that it would be either paragraph 6 or paragraph 5 of the moot proposition. The council misread the numbers. I think it's paragraph 6, Your Ladyship.
It's para 6. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Ladyship. Secondly, Your Ladyship, there is an essential religious practice test which was laid down in the Shirur Mutt case. In this test, Your Ladyship, an essential religious practice was considered to be any practice which when imposed a bar on, would erode and deplete the entire religion altogether. Therefore, Your Ladyship, because as the council was contending that there are customs which have existed since time immemorial and they shape the religion, and marriage itself is considered to be a sacrament. When you look at the Hindu code itself, the parliamentary debates itself states that marriage is one of the 10 sanskars of the Hindu religion. It is very much a religious affair. Yes.
Under the Hindu Marriage Act, is marriage a sacrament or a contract, or is it 100% of either thing?
Your Ladyship, marriage under Hindu Marriage Act is a sacrament. Sorry, Your Ladyship, may the council proceed?
Okay.
Much obliged, Your Ladyship. Your Ladyship, so Hindu Marriage Act, the Hindu Code recognizes a marriage to be a religious affair. And even in the case of Amina versus Hassan Khoya, marriage was looked in, through three views. One of them being a sacrament, which makes marriage and its allied customary practices a touchstone of religion. Your Ladyship, when there is a religious matter which does come up in front of the state, it is the duty of the state to protect all the status quo of the religion because of the secularistic principles that it is bound by. Here, the Republic of Ripplemento is duty bound to protect all of the religions that it possesses without interfering in any, which means it would have to protect the various aspects of marriage that exists in this state, in the Republic of Ripplemento as well. Finally, Your Ladyship, the culture and ethos of the Republic of Ripplemento here very clearly states that if there is a marriage and which is of heterosexual in nature, it will be recognized by the culture and ethos of the state as given under paragraph 7 of the moot proposition. So therefore, if there is a LGBT marriage, or if there is a homosexual marriage, it will be considered outside the purview of what the culture and ethos prescribe. And your ladyship,
Counsel, quick question. So, like you said, that Hindu marriage is a sacrament. The definition of sacrament and culturally, the religion prescribes that it's a permanent union of two people, and I think borrowing from the petitioner's council of flesh and bones and all of that. But we do provide for divorce as a right, which technically would mean that it's a matter of consent and it's not purely a sacrament, because culturally divorce was not a concept, but that was brought in to protect the fundamental rights of citizens. So in this case, if there is a culture or a custom that's highly discriminatory and goes against fundamental rights, as the custodian of fundamental rights, does this court have a right to protect fundamental rights? First question. Second question, does this court have a right to direct the legislature to act upon its duties and protect the fundamental rights? 3, does this court have any right in a non-legislative manner to give directives to interpret law in a way to protect fundamental rights? Should I repeat the 3 questions or are they clear?
your ladyship, just could you just repeat it just once more? I'll just note it.
Okay. First, this court is the custodian of the fundamental rights of its citizen. I think we'll all agree to that. So if there is a custom or a tradition that goes against this fundamental right, does this court have the right to intervene and protect and implement the said fundamental right? Second, does this court, in such circumstances, like I mentioned in the previous question, have the right and the duty to call upon the legislature to act upon its duty to legislate for the purpose of protecting the fundamental right? That is the second question. Third question, does this court have a right to interpret the existing laws in a way so as to uphold the fundamental rights of the citizens? These are the 3 questions.
Yes, your ladyship. Thank you, your ladyship, much obliged. Your ladyship, answering the first question, what the council would here like to state that so firstly, as the essential religious practice test that the council mentioned, it was devised basically to keep a check on the state intervention into religious customs and seeing whether if it's essential, then the state wouldn't interfere. But if it were a non-essential religious practice, then constitutional morality will definitely be given primacy too.
How do you define essential and non-essential?
Yes, your ladyship, the council is getting to that. The test essentially states that if there is a particular practice which when barred will deplete the entirety of that religion, it will be considered to be an essential religious practice. Your ladyship, so in this scenario, we consider marriage and the customs related to marriage to be an essential religious practice because firstly, it has stayed on since time immemorial. As stated in the case of S. Mahendran versus the secretary of the Travancore Devaswam of Thiruvananthapuram, it was stated that any customary practice, religious practice, ceremonies which have been laid down by the religion, if it does has stayed on since time immemorial, it forms an integral part of the religion. And secondly, your ladyship, since marriage is the foundation of society and is governed by religion in itself, it calls for procreation and continuation of society. So therefore, putting a bar on these religious practices which solemnize marriage and which constitute marriage itself would mean that it would end a population that practices it, because religion is a matter of faith which connects the people first of all to their creator. This is why, Your Ladyship, the Council contends that this is an essential religious practice, essential to the institution of marriage and essential to the institution of the religion itself. And which is why, Your Ladyship, now coming to the point, as my co-counsel mentioned, the Shabrimala case has had a review petition, which is still sub judice, but it does talk about the extent of state intervention. So the extent of state intervention as of this point in time is not known, Your Ladyship, but the essential and non-essential differentiation is very clearly known. And since the council on behalf of the respondents is contending that marriage is an essential religious practice and the customs related to marriage is an essential religious practice, therefore the state intervention in itself is curbed. And when there is a curbing of the state intervention, when there's an external body which is not allowed to enter the code, it naturally forms an exhaustive code. Answering the second question, Your Ladyship, is
Sorry, just before you proceed, if the state cannot intervene, like your co-counsel argued, the judiciary cannot intervene, can discriminatory practices go unchecked?
much obliged, Your Ladyship. Your Ladyship, another point to the definition of exhaustive code is that it is a code which exists, is formulated on its own, and it has the ability to evolve itself as it progresses with time. But it happens directly on the due to external intervention will not from the state will not be considered to be a valid way of creating those reforms.
While I
But the code
appreciate you giving this code a living organism characteristic, but my question still remains. If there is a discriminatory and a detrimental practice that is problematic when we look at our fundamental rights and rule of law that this country upholds, in that case, if the state cannot intervene as a legislature and the judiciary cannot intervene, obviously the executive cannot, then who can?
Your Ladyship, while the council agrees with the state intervention point, she would beg to differ at one point, stating that, as my co-counsel pleaded, it is a matter of the legislation. As Your Ladyship itself mentioned, that the Hindu Marriage Act has introduced the practice of divorce, which would end a marriage which is supposed to be solemnized for 7 lives of the bride and the bridegroom itself. Therefore, the legislation has that power, Your Ladyship. Even with in case of sati, the entire custom was abolished because of the abolition of the practice of sati, which was done by the legislation, but the legislature.
So then my second question, counsel, can the court answered my first question, but can the court call upon the state to act on its powers to legislate to uphold the fundamental rights which are being?
Your Ladyship, the council says that no, the judiciary cannot recommend the legislature in this scenario, because especially in the present case, it's a writ petition, and the writ petition would be to interpret the existing legislations. But the advisory jurisdiction cannot be invoked in this scenario, and the court cannot go and advise the legislature or the president, for that matter of fact, to enact a legislation or an ordinance for that matter of fact. And answering the final question, Your Ladyship, if I've understood it correctly, it was discrimination of if there's a custom which is discriminatory and is violating fundamental rights. Your Ladyship, in this situation, it is a tussle between fundamental rights and the preamble of the Constitution in itself. While the petitioners are contending that there is a breach of fundamental rights, as my co-counsel has already contended, there is a legitimate state interest in order to intervene with these with the civil rights of these individuals. Fundamental rights have already been recognized through the past judgments of Navteej Singh Johar and Nalsa cases. But when compared to when you come to the civil rights, there is a legitimate state interest in already been pleaded. What the council would do, she would move on to that second Constitution, which lays down the aims, and it is also a part of the basic structure of the Constitution, which states that Replemento is a secular nation. And if Replemento does intervene in any of the religious practices, she would be violating her secularistic principle. She would be violating her preamble. She'll be violating the aims and objectives of her constitution. As a through these contentions, your lady still contends that customs, traditions, rites, and rituals do not form an exhaustive code, and further, again, because of the principles of secularism and because and rituals are done previously, she would according to the religious rituals of the respective religions, marriage rituals. Counsel on behalf of the respondents submits that she rests her case.
Are you proceeding to your prayer?
Yes, Your Ladyship, with your permission.
Yeah.
Wherefore, it's humbly submitted to this honorable court, once an authority cited. The counsel on behalf of the respondent respectfully submits before this honorable court to declare the Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act cannot be interpreted to include members of the LGBT community, hold that civil rights cannot be granted to the members of the LGBT community, declare that customs, traditions, rites, and rituals do form an exhaustive code, hold that the members of the LGBT community religions, and or pass any other order as the court may deem fit in the interest of justice, equity, and good conscience. And for this act of kindness, the respondent shall forever humbly pray.
Great job, guys. Kushala, shall I give the feedback right now?
There's rebuttal and sorry rebuttal.
Oh, there's that. Okay.
Yes.
So the petitioners want to do a rebuttal.
Yes, Your Lordship, Your Ladyship. There are two rebuttals for the respondent side. The first is the jurisdiction under which the respondent side has approached this honorable court. If we see the paragraph number 8 of the moot proposition, where it is clearly stated that all the matters are seized and stood transferred under the Constitution of Replemento. For the transferration of the cases to the highest court is one and only the Article 139A of the Constitution of Replemento, and the respondent has approached this before this honorable court under the wrong jurisdiction. Secondly, from the respondent, the speaker number 1 has said that the petitioner is approaching petitioner is saying that there is no any separate legislature, and they are approaching before this court for the separate legislation that can be granted. The council would like to highlight that the petitioner are not appearing before this court for any such new legislature, whereas the petitioner is approaching before the court that the members from the LGBTQ community can be included within the ambits of the laws which are already existed in the already exist in the union of the replement. And again the third is as the respondent said that the formation of new legislature is the work of the legislature, and also within the customs and rituals, the judiciary cannot intervene. But if the customs and rituals are also violating the fundamental rights of any of the citizen of the counsel from the petitioner requesting to the respondent kindly submit your submission for these three arguments.
Just a clarification before my timer begins. Your Ladyship, the so there was there was one clarification made by the counsel on behalf of the petitioner. I'm just bringing that to highlight, saying that I would just reply to that clarification in the rebuttal round itself.
Sure.
All right, much obliged. Thank you for the counsels on behalf of the petitioner. Firstly, what the counsel on behalf of the respondent would like to state is that this is finally a writ petition. There were multiple writ petitions which were filed under in the high courts of various states of Riplamento under Article 226, which has been transferred to the Supreme Court. But the stature of a writ petition still continues, and the honorable court can, by using the writ of mandamus, take on this case to the Supreme Court, and hence the respondents have approached this court under Article 32. Secondly, the clarification on behalf of the petitioners was what the respondents would like to rebut to this is that this is based on their speech and the verbatim of their speech, and we have just countered their verbatim, and so we're just clarifying your clarification. And finally, the petitioners stated the final question of the petitioner was about how the judiciary can intervene in the functions of the legislature. The counsel on behalf of the respondents believe that the two jurisdictions cannot be amalgamated to form one. They believe that a writ petition, the counsel would request for another 30 seconds to wrap up. Yeah, so they believe that while the writ petition, while it is a writ petition, the advisory jurisdiction cannot advise the legislature on changing the customs and changing the legislation. Yes, Your Ladyship, with that, the council has rebutted all the points.
Great. Kushala, can we proceed to the
Yes, ma'am.
feedback?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I think I'll start with the petitioners. Before I start, great job. I think it was an extremely exciting round for me. Also for the fact that I don't know what your individual beliefs are, keeping that aside, you guys were able to argue in a manner that was convincing from both sides was excellent. So yeah, I'll start with the petitioners. The first thing is, one of the main feedback I have, you did not have to spend so much time convincing me that give the right to LGBTQ community, right? Like that was not the main argument that you had to focus on. I would have appreciated if little more focus was put on the fact to showcase that this court has that right to grant this civil rights to the community, because the moot proposition clearly states that it was dismissed. And even in one of the previous court cases before this court, and as per the moot proposition, it was not discussed. So which means that this was brought before us. We have always already agreed that these people have to be given certain rights. Now, do we have the right to grant such civil rights should have been the main contention from the petitioners. I think that was a bit missing, because everything else is then very interpretative. This becomes very specific to the law. Does the court have this right? Would be important. And also to talk about that this court should have the right, even if the law doesn't clearly provide for it, because the state doesn't have the right to get into religion. So somebody has to, when there is a discriminative or a practice that can be detrimental to the society. That's one. And that could have been given not just by the law, but you could have gone into a lot of the previous customs that were struck down, either through legislative means or through the court itself, whether it is sati or it is triple talaq, or there has just been various things that have been struck down and changed, right? So we could have gone into that. Second, I think for the petitioners, one of the important aspects was answering the question I asked. I think you guys stuck a lot to the argument you had raised, many of my questions were relating to facts which you could have used, or to some other argument that you could have given. Repeating the same argument does not answer the question, would be my second feedback. And of course, everything else was fine. One other feedback. Like another feedback, interesting feedback I thought was missing was the fact that you guys had a factually easier case. I think legally yours was tougher to say that this court has that right, but factually easier. I would have really appreciated if you stuck to a lot more emotional arguments and a lot more arguments based on the fundamental rights of the person and dignity of the person, 21 and 14. In such cases where the law is not per se clearly on your side, as someone who practices in the courts, like I've seen it, like ultimately judges also come from a place of like society, and such arguments which are focused purely on the fact that that person has the right to dignity, a dignified life, a life to lead their life as a normal citizen of this country, should have been a lot higher in your arguments. That would have been, I think that was literally your argument, could have been your only argument in these circumstances. Other than that, I think you guys covered a lot of your points.
Thank you, ma'am.
For the respondents, I think you guys had factually a tougher case to argue that you shouldn't give a fundamental right to an individual. Legally, possibly a stronger case because you stuck to the argument that this court doesn't have the right to legislate. Having said that, I think holding a position that state also doesn't have the right to get into this would be a sort of a self goal in a real circumstance. In a mood, of course, but when you go to a court and say you don't have the right, we also don't have the right, then who has the right? Like that was the one sort of an issue that I saw with your argument. You didn't have to go into whether it is the state's right or not. The court doesn't have the right to tell me also it is my right, which is true. The state, as far as our laws go, like we don't have the right to tell the state to legislate either. And that would have been sufficient without going into the fact that the state also doesn't have the right to intervene, right? And I asked the question of referendum, I think, to Harshit. So the Constitution doesn't provide for a right to referendum. It doesn't deny it either, but it doesn't provide for it either. I asked this because very recently, I don't know if any of y'all are from Delhi, but Kejriwal mentioned that Delhi will soon go into a referendum for full statehood of Delhi. And there was a lot of back and forth talking about we don't have a right to referendum. Then they said, no, we do. And it's a gray area. So I thought you guys might have gone into that because many countries that legislated on the civil rights of LGBTQ community actually did a referendum. So that would have been something would have been interesting if either you would have said that no, the Constitution doesn't have a right, or you would have said we will do it, but that's not for this court to direct. Would have been interesting as well. I think in terms of answering questions, you guys were very calm and very logical with answering. This is specifically to Vaibhavi. Don't speak so fast. Like when you do speak so fast, I think you repeat a lot of what you said because your points were very, very good. And it's a constructive criticism. But if you speak so fast, you end up missing your points. It was difficult for me to follow your points sometimes because there were multiple points, just a lot of information packed into like 3 sentences. Like, so I would recommend that you speak as slowly as possible. Make it a practice, because that is something that will be useful for you later on. That's about it. I think all of you all touched upon a lot of interesting points, which was very good. This would be an excellent argument if it ever happens in court or happens soon. So let's see what happens. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Your Ladyship.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It
Thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Any of y'all have any points, like you want to state that how you felt preparing for the moot, or any arguments that struck you or that you found interesting?
It was just difficult to prepare from the respondent side, like keeping your beliefs aside and just putting something that the Tushar Mehta, the Solicitor General, has said. It's difficult to plead in that way.
Yeah, we
That's
just had
it.
like
That's just
fingers
I want.
crossing. I don't mean
Yeah.
this. I don't mean this.
What about the petitioners?
No, I'm like, from the petitioner side, it was a good one, but the thing was due to the regular storms and all the things, we were not able to do our proposition within the time. Like what we wanted to do in our proposition, our memo, we were not able to do so. Like where VPN was not accessing and all the things, but we do our best with the Google search itself.
No, it will. You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Your Ladyship,
Thank
and
you so much.
congratulations to the petitioners as well.
Yeah, you
Thank
too,
you.
guys.
Thank you, Ladyship. Thank you.
Thank you. Kushila, can you stay back? I have a question for you.
Yes.
Others can drop off, I guess, right? Like they can drop off, right?
Yes.
Kushla, should I mark their scores on the Google Sheet? That's it? Then you want
Yes, ma'am.
me to send? Do I have to send that Google Sheet to anyone, or you guys have access to it?
Just mark it in the Google Sheet, ma'am. If we don't have access to it, we'll contact you.
All right.
I think we'll have. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. Thanks.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
The Masters in International Law. So,
Yeah.
does it have any scope in international law? Like,
Of course. So mine is specifically a master's